Cool. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. Today we've got special guest Thomas Morales. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Like I said, just enjoying the weather. Toronto summer is a good time.
Awesome, man. Awesome. It looks very, very nice. We were just having a very interesting conversation actually, but I basically just want to know, like, can you give the audience a sort of like 2 minute overview of your life and how you got to sort of stage you are now?
Yeah, sure. It's been quite the interesting and fun journey, to say the least. I actually moved from Venezuela, South America, to Canada in the year 2000. I was 9 years old, thanks to my parents making a good decision at the time because things got pretty shitty in Venezuela, unfortunately. I actually haven't gone back since, but came here and basically, speed up to like 2014, graduated from university, wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I graduated from with a degree in health science and kinesiology, but had no clue what the heck I wanted to do. And so I ended up, funny enough, I ended up starting an air quality testing company. And then 1 year later, I merged with another guy who had an air testing company as well. And very quickly, basically, my focus was on, I started systemizing and automating operations so that, and that allowed me to create a lot more time in my day. And my business partner who I merged with, what we did for the next few years is we would actually start companies after natural disasters. So if there was a windstorm, for example, we'd start a roofing company. If there was a hurricane, we'd start a flood restoration company. So we got really good at starting brands like overnight. And essentially we just get, Google ads going. We get a web landing page, not even really a website, a phone number, and we would basically just test keywords. And if certain times, if certain keywords hit and if the demand was really there, then we get like a bombardment of leads. And so then we would panic and figure out, like, how do we do this? What's roofing all about? And we would find local contractors to do the work. So effectively, we're basically helping homeowners with their insurance claims, because what happens in a natural disaster is the demand is so great that, homeowners, like, they would, the first thing they would do is call insurance, and insurance would say, hey, like, contact a vendor, get any vendor you can get, so they can at least mitigate damages. So if it's like a roof, if it was let's say it's a windstorm, like in one of the examples, be like, you got to tarp it up and, get someone to like mitigate damages, and then we can assess it from there and move forward accordingly. And so that's where they would go on Google, right? And they search like roofing contractor, and then that's how they would find us. And then from that point on, we'd actually just help the homeowner with their entire insurance claim, which they really benefited, because when you reach out to an insurance company, they assign you a preferred vendor, and that preferred vendor is aligned with the insurance company. So it's not in their best interest to kind of get you either the best kind of repairs or the best materials, or they're trying to lower costs. They don't want to bite, the hand that feeds them. So but with us, we're aligned with we were at the time, we're aligned with the homeowner, because we're trying to justify as much work as we can get to help them and like ultimately award us the work. So, but then, finding the vendors was a whole other process on our end, like, finding people to do the work and stuff. So anyway, we did that for a few years, and it was quite lucrative. There's a lot of money to be made from insurance, but we grew tired of fighting with insurance, because it's just a constant fight, right? You're just always fighting with them, trying to get homeowners what they deserve. And sometimes it's a breeze, but I would say most of the time it's not. So yeah, I grew tired of that. It wasn't like fun money, so to speak. I mean, it was nice helping the homeowners, but it wasn't very, very energizing. And so funny enough, my business partner, who I've been doing this with, who I merged with in the air quality testing space, who to date we still co-own this business together, with a third guy who actually is the head of ops and runs that. He was working on an air purifier company, and that was kind of his slow play. Like, he was slowly building this brand over time. And then, but when COVID hit, what happened is the reopening guidelines for dentists in Ontario here in Canada, and I presume other parts of the world too, basically they were indirectly saying that every dentist needed an air purifier in every operatory. And main reason being is because most dentists rent their space. They don't own the space, so they don't have access to actually change the HVAC system. So, and what you want to do is you want to improve airflow, and a purifier does that in addition to actually filtering the air. So if you sold the purifier at the beginning of COVID, you were going to sell out. Doesn't matter. Like, you just need to raise your hand and say, I sell purifier. So it became kind of like another natural disaster. I guess it was, in a sense. Yeah, he heard from a guy who was in the dental space, and he's like, hey, have you launched this thing? Because if you haven't, like, you gotta launch now. So he's like, okay, like, he put some ads, put his website up, and boom, he started selling like crazy. So he contacted me. He's like, hey man, like, I really need your help. At the time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was trying to figure out. I still have this air testing company that's relatively systemized and automated, which is kind of like a cash cow business. And so I was trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to really focus my time on, because I knew it was done with insurance work. And so he's like, hey, I got this, crazy situation, need your help. I want you to help me with the ops, the logistics. So I went deep into the product world. I went from service to product. So figure out, like, how do we get a plane to getting all these purifiers? How do we figure out fulfillment, logistics, get a nice CRM going? How do we integrate that with Shopify and all kinds of stuff? So that was pretty fun. I mean, we did like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a matter of days. Like, it was absolutely nuts. And so basically from there, I became CEO of that company for about a year. And 1 year later, the thing is, before I joined Jasper, the air purifier company business, I had this itch to go out on my own. I've always had partners for the most part. And so, but that itch kind of came back. And so I ended up parting ways with that company. And I wasn't totally sure on what the heck I was going to do again, but somehow, luckily, I got to starting to create content and building my personal brand. Not totally sure on what it is that I was going to do, but I'm like, I think that it's going to be valuable to start building a personal brand on the things that interest me. And so from there, I tried a ton of stuff. I thought I was going to create a course, this and that. But what the clarity I've had over the last year has been truly incredible, which is like my passion, because I've been such a Swiss Army knife, but because of starting all these different businesses, I've had to, play so many roles. I've learned a lot, from accounting, marketing, operations. And so people would ask me, like, what do you do? It's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know. Like, I start companies. Like, I don't really know. But what the clarity I've had more recently over the last maybe year and a half is, like, my passion is systems, operations, processes, automation. That's really what excites me. And those are the problems I really had fun working on, and any of the businesses that I worked on. And so it's kind of led me to today, where I've kind of found this niche or target market, which is helping founders and CEOs who are stuck in their operations, helping them systemize and automate so they can remove themselves from the day-to-day and really focus more on growth. And this is where I'm at today, kind of like fractional CEO services. And I'm just like super grateful and excited to be working on, to be able to just focus in on the problem that excites me most. And that's where I'm at now.
Damn, son, there's a lot to unpack there. Really, really cool experience, man. I actually wanted to start right at the end. So, I know you briefly touched upon it, but what would you say is like your unfair advantages? So, like, the things that are natural to you that you naturally excel at, and it feels frictionless.
Yeah, it's I think it's just identifying where systems are required and what the triggers are for these systems. So one awesome concept that I talk about, and that every time I communicate this to, like, whether it's on a sales call or console or a client, I explain that there's this one concept that I think I haven't had anyone else say it, and it's been applicable to every single business I've worked on or worked with. And that's the concept that everything in the business is either a project or an accountability. So, I mean, going back to your question, I feel like me, and I'll touch on that concept back in a second, but like, I feel like my ability to simplify things and be able to group things into certain buckets allows me to really move quickly. So projects are really like what working on the business looks like. It's growth. And accountabilities which I don't even know if that's a word. I think it is, but the word accountability exists, but I always use the word accountabilities in plural, is what working in the business is. So those are the things that they have to happen for the business to stay alive. They're recurring. So an example, bookkeeping is an accountability. It has to happen. Customer support, right? Like that has to happen. Fulfillment, those things, like these things have to happen. And then you have your projects. The thing is, projects often will turn into accountabilities. So if, let's say, you want to execute like Facebook marketing ads, all right, well, that's a project for someone to execute. Once you actually execute the pipeline, now it's an accountability. It's like, okay, well, what are the things you need to now keep track on to maintain and improve and report on? And so I think grouping everything into one of those two and really focusing in on the stuff that happens in the business first before we start to focus on the things that happen on the business is really, I think, what paves a nice path for clients and people I work with clarity as to like what we need to prioritize and is this, which one of these two things are we looking at here in your business?
That's super interesting, man. So just to clarify what you just said, so you kind of focus on working in the business first, so the day-to-day operations, making sure that all of those processes are optimized and automated as best as possible, and then you work on the sort of on the business type tasks. But I feel like with those types of tasks, they're more like nice to have rather than a necessity. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, that's totally right. And if you think about it, like, we want to make sure the business is fit for growth. Like it can actually take on the growth. Because if you have a leaky ship, you work on building the ship, it's going to continue to leak, and that's going to be a big problem. So typically, like, it's kind of like a 3-step process. One is like, I'll do a process map just so I can really understand everything that's going on in the business. So first is let's optimize and automate processes. Second step is, okay, now let's implement my accountability system, which I can touch on if you're curious about, but it's basically, let's systemize all the manual processes that are happening in the business. These aren't projects. These are the things that are happening on a recurring basis. And often these things are just happening like on a whim. They're not being tracked, but it's surprising how many things are happening in the business that you haven't really think about. Like they're just happening because surprisingly, people have been getting them done just when they, I guess, at the right times, but often when businesses fail, it's because these things get out of hand. So it's accountabilities. And then from there, it's making sure once I implement the accountability system, it's making sure the CRO founder doesn't hold any accountabilities himself that he shouldn't. These low ROI things that he's doing, well, delegate those. Okay, now we can focus on growth. Let's focus on implementing, we can focus on a project management system, a meeting system, a weekly scorecard system so that you can keep a pulse on your business and helping them really stay present and focused on growth.
That's a lot of wisdom you got there, man. I wanted to actually like dive deeper into that sort of unfair advantage. So with this whole system and understanding how to like categorize buckets and things like that,
yes.
Like, when did you first kind of like spot that this was something you were naturally like advantageous at, and number two, you really enjoyed?
It must have been so I've been reading like tons and tons of books on business, listening to lots of podcasts and trying myself lots of different things. And when I started to work on the air purifier business, I think, that's when it was kind of like a bigger beast. It wasn't just like a hit it and quit it kind of situation. And also larger in scale than the air testing company that I still co-own. It's where I think it forced me to not just think about like how do we like make more money? How does the business grow? It's like, oh shoot, like we need to systemize the stuff that's actually already happening, because there's a lot of stuff happening in the business. Like we've grown to the point that there's lots going on, and like we're just assuming and hoping that things are happening when they should, and things are bound to break, and things did break. So realizing that is when I realized it's when I kind of had the clarity that, I was familiar with SOPs and standard operating procedures, but I actually have mixed feelings about them, because the truth is, and I tried this is why I have the mixed feelings, because I've tried this myself, and so many CEOs, like I'm sure all CEOs and business owners and founders can relate. The problem with standard operating procedures is that you get excited, you create it once, and then you put it away, and it gets dust on it, and it gets old and irrelevant. And even if you hire someone, you tell them, here's the SOPs, they'll look at it once, they'll believe they understand the process and they won't really revisit it. They're not actually looking at it. So if you make a change to SOP, it's not like they're going back to change it. So it gets, these SOPs get old. So and this is again some of the frictions that I felt that led me to realize that we need a system where people are actually working in the place the SOP lives, because then it's dynamic. It's ever changing with the process. And so and I think that's, I've heard the book The E-Myth and so many other books, they touch on the differences between in the business and on the business. I think that's what inspired me to realize that, like, okay, we have a solid project management system, but that's when I had the realization that, like, these are the things that we're working toward optimizing the business. But what about all this like SOP iffy stuff? And so the accountability system I started building is basically it works like this. It's, first of all, you clarify what is the thing that you're doing. So let's give an example of customer support, because this is something I had to systemize. And we had a lot of problems with it, which is what led me to systemize this accountability, as I call it. So it's like, great, there's customer support. First of all, who owns it? So one of the frictions I realized is, like, often many people owned many hats and wore many hats, and that's fine. But one hat can't be worn by two people. One person can wear multiple hats, but one hat can only be worn by one person. And it's often the case that people just they get their hands on everything, and that is a big problem, because that's how things slip through. Nobody has real accountability. Nobody has ownership. So it's like, who owns customer support? Okay, so we assigned a virtual assistant, or at the time one of our assistants, to take it over. The next question after what and who is, how often does this have to get done? And this was kind of a test and trial process that over time I built. But how often does it have to get done? I realized that every accountability can be grouped into a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Sometimes you need a bi-weekly. Okay, fine. For the most part, it's always a daily or weekly thing, and most things are weekly. So what is the customer support? Okay, this is a daily accountability. I need them to handle this daily. Okay. And then the next question is, what does done look like? What does done look like? Well, in my case, for customer support, I'm a big fan of inbox zero for almost everything: email, my Telegram, my chat support, whatever it may be. And so what done looks like to me is a screenshot of no open tickets at the end of the day. If I can see there's no open tickets, then sweet, that's all I care about. The final piece is a simple submission form that people can submit what the done version of their work looks like into it. And initially, when I first implemented this accountability system, and with any system, there was a bit of I wouldn't say pushback, but skepticism. Oh my God, this is going to add time to my day. It's going to complicate everything. So I actually did it myself for 2 weeks before actually telling everybody to start doing, because I want to prove to myself and to them that this is actually a good system. What I found is that, first of all, it only takes a minute to complete, less than that. And actually implementing the accountability system for the team provide them so much clarity. People actually have relief when they know exactly what they're supposed to do, how often they're doing it, and what done looks like. And so instead of focusing on SOPs, I clarify, well, what is the accountability system? We work in there. We always update what done looks like, because they have to use this form on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. If you're going to switch the accountability to someone else, that person will train the next person. And so I worry less about SOPs. Of course, there's resources and references that we can have in a business archive to help with the process, but more focusing on what done looks like is really my kind of my focus. Sorry if I don't know if we strayed
no
away from.
This is interesting. So just to follow on from what done looks like, sometimes KPIs, how do you define that in a way? Because sometimes there are no metrics, there are no numbers to define what done looks like. So how do you make sure that that is clear to your clients?
So what I actually do is I speak to the team. First, I speak to the CEO and founder, and I get from his perspective, what are all the accountabilities? But then I actually speak to the individual team members and I want to get from their perspective what they believe their ongoing accountabilities are. And I actually work it with them, because I need them to feel like they're building this with me, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So they actually help me in the process to clarify what done looks like. Often they just need my guidance to really simplify and get more specific and outcome oriented. But ultimately it's more pulling the answers out of them. But it's like whenever possible, I love screenshots. Like if you can, what does that look like? Like what would the screenshot equivalent be? It can't. Sometimes it's not always a screenshot, and that's fine. Maybe it's just a checkbox in the checklist and saying done. But if someone is submitting an accountability daily or weekly, even if it's not a screenshot, and saying like, okay, both these checklist items have been complete, then like it's on, like, you know, you're really, they're saying that it's getting done regularly as it should be. So it's easy to go back and see like, hey, like, is there someone that's not a good fit? Because they've been saying that this exact thing has been happening for a week or 2 weeks. And it's very easy to identify when things aren't getting done. One more thing I'll mention about the accountability system that I implement is I say that it automates accountability, because I have an automation in place so that when the accountability, because it's good to clarify when things are supposed to happen, but how do you supposed to know as the owner that things actually got done when they should and how they should? Because if I don't implement this piece, it's almost like an SOP in the sense like nobody's checking that this thing got done. How do I know? And so what I do is I implement automation where if the accountability doesn't get done in the frequency it's set, then the accountability owner gets been notified via email, and whoever else needs to be notified, whether it's the founder or CEO. And it's not about people, you got to catch them when they're not doing the work. It's actually more about scalability. As a business scales, things are going to break. And you need to know in advance. It's like, okay, so, you know, the notification isn't like, why didn't you do it? It's like, hey, like, let us know. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Like, what is the reason for this? How soon can you get to this? So we can really understand what is the pain point? What is the reason it didn't get done? That's what it's really about. So we can address those concerns. And if I can do that, then what I'm doing for the CEO or founders, I'm removing internal triggers. Like, you know, I'm sure you can relate, all business owners can relate with, they're going on their accounting or somewhere and they go down a rabbit hole. Like, what's going on here? Oh shoot, they didn't do this. And oh my God, right? Because they just like, there's no system to check. And like, you can go down this rabbit hole of getting stressed out and then messaging all your team, hey, what happened here? What this system does is allows you to really be present and focus on growth, because you're getting notified when something isn't getting done when it should, via this, you know, by incorporating automation into it.
I really, really like that actually, because like we've started building SOP, so we're kind of like a fairly new ghostwriting agency, and so we're kind of being quite scrappy at the moment. I feel like the types of people you work with are more like established founders type thing, because it sounds like they've got quite a lot of different departments. But we're like very super scrappy at the moment, so we're just thinking about, okay, cool, what SOP should we start building? And like, given from what you said, it sounds like SOPs aren't that great, because I think one thing about systems, I do see a lot of value in systems, but as you say, like sometimes you feel like there's a good place for a system, but you just do it once and it's never done again. So what's the point of spending all that time to build that system? And so your whole thing is, instead of building SOPs, it's like look at the fundamental tasks or the accountabilities that are needed to be done, as opposed to the shiny object type thing. Oh, this could be put into a system type thing. I really, really like that, and I really resonate that, man. How do you? So is just to sort of end on this point, like, is this how you define or define a difference between like what needs to be systemized and what doesn't need to be systemized?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So is having accountabilities how you're able to categorize what needs to be systemized or what could be systemized, or is like an optional type thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You know, I've been so obsessed with systems that I've gone like to both. Like I've gone the other extreme where like I try to systemize absolutely everything and implement automation where I can. But I've realized that, you know, systems are actually not about rigidity, and they need to adapt with time. And I actually, whenever I can, actually, I will eliminate an automation if I believe I can go without it, because it's simpler system, the easier it is to maintain. And so I'm a big fan of simplicity now. But I do, to answer your question, like, yeah, if there is something that has to happen in the business, there's an accountability, meaning it's a recurring thing. And it's often, and it's time-based, like we're talking daily, weekly, it's a recurring thing, then that is something that needs to be systemized to a certain extent. But again, I focus a lot more on what done looks like, and I worry a lot less about the how. If I can communicate exactly what success looks like, then I'm going to stress less about making sure you do it the exact same way I say it. Although it doesn't mean I can't provide additional resources and references and train you when I give you the ownership of that accountability.
Interesting. Interesting. Talk to me about how you built a six-figure business with 3 hours a month. That's pretty insane. I'm sure a lot of the passive income bros are screaming to know how, man.
Yeah, well, I will say that if I was going to do it, if my goal was to build something like that again, it would not be with an environmental testing company.
Why?
What's that?
Why is that?
I think it's more complex than a lot of other different businesses you could do. Like it involves a laboratory. There's some liability involved. To me, I started that because it was just I'd actually met through a friend. He went out one night and he's like, "Hey, we're going to my buddy's place, who's my current business partner." And he was living like at a really dope pad, and he was at the time he was like 26, I was like 25, and I'm like, "Hey, like what's going on here?" Like, and he was telling me about the air quality testing industry, and that's how I got into business. And then that's what led me to start my own. And then 1 year later, I merged with him. So that's kind of how I ended up there. But really it was about leveraging like systems, automations, and accountability. So the exact same accountability system I was talking about, I implemented this to the air testing company. So it's so one, systems are important, good people are also important. Having good people is great. But really it's like automating even the simple things that save so many hours, even for my head of operations. For example, like invoicing, doing follow-ups, all of these things can be systemized and automated a lot. So like one person can actually do a lot of work with the right systems in place, through email marketing, through automating a lot of the conversations with clients, automating report creation. So right now it's at the point where my head of operations, he mostly just has to do, he has to do the selling. He schedules the job, and then it's at the point where like he'll go to the job, and then all he does is uploads the report into my system that I created, which is actually built off of Airtable. And I have certain criterias and automations in place where it's like, have they paid? Like if they haven't paid, they'll be automatically followed up to pay, which is, integrated Stripe with Zero. If they pay and the report is uploaded, then it automatically sends them the report. And then it also does a follow automatically asking how was it, and then a testimonial email later on as well. So it's like he has 20 hands, but really he only has to focus on his two, because there's so many other things happening behind the scenes. So it's really about empowering your team. Like with good systems and processes and automations, one person can do a lot of work and can handle hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy to think like how sort of granular you can take this, because it sounds to me like you've really gone like full in with these like different integrations, different automations. Like I said, like I'm fairly new to this whole even biz space. So it's just like hearing about how you're creating these like complex systems is super interesting. I guess like to backtrack a bit, if someone was say like me, for example, just started an agency, just started a business, looking to scale it up, when would you say would be a good time to start implementing systems? Because I kind of have the idea that focusing on needle moving tasks right at the start of the journey, when you're starting to build up traction, is more important than solidifying the systems in place. Because like I think for me it's more important that I deliver for clients, as opposed to like thinking optimizing how much money I'm spending on marketing, or like how much time I'm spending creating the content, or whatever it is. Like when would you advise, or how would you advise implementing systems or slowly integrating systems into a new business?
Yeah, I don't think it's black or white. I don't think there's a specific time, but I will say, with the business, the air testing business, I've done it. So we did it so many times that it became clear what kind of things should be systemized. By no means did we start out with these automations, right? So just like I was mentioning before, in terms of like systems, you want to keep things simple, and like when you don't need an automation, like don't automate. I believe that letting friction be your guide is great. So I believe in what you're doing and saying, which is really do these things manually. I'm all about that. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of actually an example is a few years ago or a couple of years ago, or what was it? Yeah, I got the idea of starting a moving company, but that I was going to fully automate this, like, or most of it. And so I started building systems and automations way more in advance before like I even really needed these things. And the result was I lost a bunch of money because I built these systems and automations based on assumption. And I wasn't letting friction be my guide as to what I actually need to systemize and optimize. So I'm a big fan of doing things manually. I think when you're at the point when you can clearly define, when you're like super comfortable with the process, meaning you understand it in and out, and it's like super predictable to you. And again, I don't think it's a black or white thing. That's when you can really start to think about, okay, well, how can I systemize it? So what does systemize really mean? It's like either how can I like optimize its efficiency, or how can I automate it, or how can I delegate it? And if you're going to delegate, then it's an accountability. So what is it? How often does it have to get done? What does done look like? Put together some simple submission form for someone to be able to submit that accountability when you delegate it. And then the final piece to that is like, let's create an automation alert. So like if things aren't happening as they should, you get notified. Because otherwise we have these open loops in our head that are just like, you know, you're going to bed at night and you're like, oh, what about this? What about that? Oh, actually he was supposed to, did he do this yesterday? I don't know. But if I have an accountability system in place, and I know my subconscious knows that there's a system that I will get notified when I actually need to go in and look, then I can actually be, again, more present, more relaxed, can sleep better, can be more productive, because my subconscious knows their system is in place. But your subconscious is smart, right? Like if you don't implement that automation piece, like it'll still be an open loop because it knows that, okay, like, yeah, you taught someone how to do it, but you still need to like go in and check if things are being done as they should, or maybe if they did do it last week. You don't really know. So I think it's just about when you're really comfortable, and then again defining whether it's something you can automate. But I think putting in the work, the manual work, is really important at the beginning.
Yeah, dude, I completely resonate when you said the open loops thing, like how
Mm.
there's just always tasks in your head. Like I've always tried to implement systems into my own life. Like I read the Getting Things Done or something like that. Getting
Love
Things
that
Done,
book.
yeah. Read that
By
book
the
and I
way,
was like,
the
I need to,
teens
yeah.
version is, I don't know if you probably read the regular one, but the getting, pointing back because it's back there, but
Yeah.
the Getting Things Done teens, like for teenagers, is incredible. He
Really?
actually, David Allen actually suggested to, I can't remember if it was on a podcast or web. He's like, you're better off reading that one because like that's like the simplified version. So it's a lot more simple and to the point. So and you know, when you can simplify something, it's always makes it easier to consume and digest and learn. But yeah, that's, you know, that book has had a huge impact in my life. Like
So
I have my own personal
yeah.
accountabilities
Oh,
that I
really?
do. Yeah, like so to me, accountabilities it's personal or
Yeah.
business. So like I have, for example, I have a weekly checklist, and I have a monthly checklist, and I have a quarterly checklist, and I just have a time block. So I'm huge into time blocking. Love time blocking. I have a time block, recurring time block, every Friday for 2 hours. Friday morning. I like to do it before the weekend so that I can really go, again, be more present on the weekend and like relax, because I feel like I know where things are at. So I just clarify, like, what are the things that I have to do on a recurring basis? Like, you know, even something as simple as like, do I got to clean the bathroom? Do I got to clean the place? Like, it's all about like, I don't want things juggling in my brain. I just want to use this for the present. And so something is recurring. All right, well, how often does it get done? And like, what does that look like? And time block when I'm going to actually do it.
That's super interesting, man. What can you just summarize David Allen's teen version of the Getting Things Done? I'm curious to hear like why is it so much more simple?
Well, I actually only read that one, so I cannot tell you how it compares with the other one, but he said it's much more simpler, and it makes sense. But it has illustrations, and it just gets right to the point. It has like exercises that you can write on. It's a little more comedic or fun, so I think it's like easier to consume. But it's almost like a workbook, very practical. So, yeah, like I said, I actually haven't read the original, so I cannot actually make a comparison. But as per him, it's easier to digest the teens version, which makes sense.
That's super interesting, man. I mean, just going back to my my own journey, like I've consumed all these kind of productivity books because I want to be like the most
Yeah.
optimized human being. Like even in my life, I had like Notion, like complex Notion systems and things like that. But one thing I realized about myself is that I don't think like I am a systems person. So I know how like there's two like types of people. So that's why I've partly got I've got a co-founder as well. So he is the systems guy. Like he loves his operational, like day-to-day fulfillment, that kind of thing, and seeing how we can like optimize these processes. But for me, I feel like I'm more sort of like the client relationship or the higher vision, bigger picture type people. Like
Mm,
I cannot live in the details. I've tried, and it always just
mm,
feels so like it has so much friction about it. Like I want to, and I understand the value because I understand like
yeah.
having zero like inbox or no open loops at night, like really it
Yeah.
does give you really nice sleep. But for me,
Hmm.
it's so difficult. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you have any experience or like know anyone who's like that, but like what advice would you tell people who like understand the importance of systems but don't think in that way?
Yeah. I mean, um, for me, I love that if I'm going to systemize something, it's going to create less friction for me in the future. Like that's really the motivator. Um, but like, I get it. It can be like overwhelming. And I think a great place to start is thinking about that project or accountability. So like on a related topic, um, I think that a company operating system has five parts. Two of those is a project and accountabilities. Then you have like the vision, the meeting system, and workspaces. Workspaces is like where are people actually working on a day to day. Um, and so, um, and by the way, not to get into another tangent, but a great book, especially for your co-founder, if he's into like the ops and systems, is Traction by Gino Wickman. That's an incredible book. A lot of my systems, if I had to say like two books that have highly influenced me, it's Traction and probably David Allen, Getting Things Done. Um, but I think like this is why I love these concepts of like project or accountability because it just simplifies everything down. And I think that is the key to like almost everything. Just really simplifying and like once you nail down your accountabilities, then again you can focus a lot more on your project. So I think really clarifying like what is the thing that we're doing and what does done look like? Because so many people will hire someone and they're like, okay, I need a social media manager. Okay, so you hire someone, and often the end result is you're upset and you're frustrated because you're not getting the result you want. And if you ask yourself, okay, well, did I clarify like what success looks like? You probably didn't. What does success look like for this person? So, like starting from the end, and if you do that, then you can kind of create their own accountability. Like what are the things that they're actually accountable to? Don't just expect people to do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, because that's how systems will break. So I hope that was helpful. But looking at again, that accountability's concept has done wonders for me and my clients.
Maybe you need to see a thread on it, mate.
Oh, I have actually. It's yeah, I have, but I can't write about it enough.
Okay. Share one with me when you have a minute. I'll be down to read it.
Sure.
Yeah, cool. Let's I want to backtrack a little bit on your journey. So you talked about like starting the air testing company and then a few other brick and mortar companies.
Yeah.
What has your experience been like
They weren't actually brick
starting?
and mortar,
They
but
weren't,
they were
okay.
local service businesses. Yeah.
So you are like an online business, but you connected brick and mortar services. No, yeah.
More often than not, they were just like local contractors that we'd find like on Kijiji
Mhm.
or this kind of thing. Sometimes they were brick and mortar, though. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
The middleman.
Hmm. And what was your opinions of like these traditional type service businesses versus online business?
I really like them. Actually, it's funny. Like, uh, again, like just I've you sometimes think like, oh, this is like the best thing, like this is clearly the winner, and over time I'm realizing like there is no like exact right perfect way. There's many different ways to do many different things, and so it's ultimately like empowering your own strengths and experiences, and what promoting your success. And there's not like any one way. Now, in my opinion, um like I love service businesses, and I did service businesses, local service businesses for a while. Then I got into product through the air purifier. Then I thought I wanted to design a bag, which I did. I was going to launch a bag company. But then, over time I started to realize like my passion is really systems. So it's like, how did I end up in the online world? It's simply because I realized I want to help people. I want to help founders with their systems and operations. And so the best way I found for me to do that is to take it online. And that's just become the best platform for me to connect with my clients. So I think it's like clarifying like what does success look like, similarly to what I was saying before. Like what are we trying to do? But like if you're telling me, hey, I'm thinking of starting like an HVAC company, like awesome. Like I love service companies. They're like I own one myself, right? The air quality testing company. It's still going strong today. Like I think they're amazing businesses that could be that you can turn into passive cash cows. Like I love simple service companies. Like I thought this concept was simple, but it's actually quite complex. So I got that one wrong. But like duct cleaning, like I love that. It's so clear what you're selling. We don't offer duct cleaning, but we thought about it. It's like maybe that should be a service that Air Quality Canada, the air testing company, should offer. So yeah, I don't think there's any one right way. I think it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I love service companies.
Interesting. One of the things you said that really resonated with me was like the best decisions you've made is basically focusing on one goal at a time. Like, what
Yes.
is your current goal at the moment?
My current goal is so I was at a point where I was like launching a business every 90 days. And so like that's the opposite of what I'm doing now. My so then I got the clarity that I just want to focus on systems and operations, and that really that's one of my strengths, and I have a lot of valuable insight and knowledge to offer to potential, to my target market. And so my goal was to help, one founder with the systems operation. And then my goal now is I'm realizing that like I want to scale this now. I want to scale this operation. So my goal is to basically turn this into an agency. Why? Because I want to I also, just like I'm helping founders replace themselves in their businesses, I need to I'm not looking to just, I mean, if this was like, I'm not only looking to just sell my time. For me, it doesn't mean it's the right or wrong way. Like, right, if you're like Alex Hormozy, I heard him say on a podcast like a day or two ago, it's like if you're a painter and you enjoy painting, well then like paint. If you would want to enjoy business, well then then you hire someone else and you grow the business. But it's not like one right or the other. It's no clear one direction, right? It's very case by case. So for me, but my goal now is like I just want to help as many people as I can, and I want to systemize my own operation. So my goal really is to continue to scale and turn this into like a systems and operations agency. And I'm just focused on like one client at a time and continuing to increase the number of clients I can actively take in any one given moment.
That's interesting. Are you hiring people to help you fulfill then? And then you're just managing
I'm in that
business?
process now.
Or you're hiring or you're doing the fulfillment?
I'm about to start the process of hiring someone and to help with what I call like, client work. Because basically the way that it works for me, like the service I offer now is, we have a weekly call. We identify the goal for the week and then actually help them implement that. And then we repeat that cycle continuously, working from the most important to least important. So that implementation piece is the one part that makes sense for me to let go, still monitor and oversee and still partake in those weekly calls. But that's one piece that I'm in the process of, or I'm about to be in the process of replacing myself from.
Interesting. go back to what you said about you were starting businesses every 90 days.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, man? Like, where does this like entrepreneurial itch of just constantly starting stuff come from?
I think it was so from starting companies after natural disasters, we got really good at starting brands very quick, like essentially overnight. It's like, oh shoot, there's a hurricane coming, like, or oh shoot, there was a flood like last night. Everything is, you know, the cities are flooded, like people are panicking. All right, like let's buy floodrestoration.ca or whatever it may be, and like let's get going. So we did that so many times that, and kind of relating back to my point before, is like I did, when people ask me like what do you do, I didn't know how to answer that. And so when I stopped, when I was stopped being the CEO at the air purifier business, I wasn't totally sure on what I wanted to do, but I thought, well, what's my skill set? I thought it was like starting brands and companies, and I knew I wanted to build my own, my start creating building my personal brand. And so I thought, what better way to maybe launch a business every 90 days and start documenting that journey. And so it started with bag bag company, which is like this one. It was Uno Design. It's shut down now because I'm clear on my one goal now. Then
Mhm.
it was the moving company. It was movesimply.com, but I shut that down too. And now it's really just this. So I think it was just me trying to figure out, hey, what do I do with my skill set, and uh, how do I showcase my journey to people in an interesting way? And I thought launching a business every 90 days could be that.
That's really interesting that you say that. It sounds like you've just basically taken action on everything that you've thought of. And I think that's a very interesting skill. I mean, it's probably like one of the most important for any entrepreneur. So like, is that something that you've always
That's a good
had
way to put it.
innately? Is that something you've always had innately? Because I think a lot of people, especially in
Mm,
like this whole like creator space, people who want to build their own first businesses, that, I mean, especially me, like it took me a long time just to build this ghostwriting agency, because of all the limiting beliefs, because of all the procrastination, just reading a lot, consuming and not taking action. Like, how has that journey been for you? Because it sounds to me like you've just been doing bang, 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 bang.
yeah, I mean those bangs weren't on target most of the
Okay.
time, but um, and even just like creating content everywhere. At one point, I started creating content everywhere, but like focusing on one thing. It's like I'm just gonna double down on Twitter, relating to what we were talking about before. But it's a very good point you make, and it's not something that I've reflected on too much about myself. But yeah, taking action and like really just testing things out has been huge for me. I think there's something to say about me. Like whenever I get an idea, it's like, or even if I want to like buy something or I want to try something, like it's hard for me to get it on my head. Like I have to do it. So I think that's probably played in my favor a little bit. The anxiety of like waiting to do the thing that I want to do. It's like let's just do it. Um, I mean, I think that's probably helped. But I mean, starting companies after natural disasters, I think me being fortunate enough to experience that has led me to realize that like you can really get a lot done in a short amount of time. And so, what's the excuse to waiting around when I was launching these brands overnight? So I think that exposure, in addition to probably like my own natural anxiety I have about waiting to get to do things that I want to do, both together, I think has really helped me to just get moving. And I've realized over time, like that's the key. You just gotta try, and like failing is part of the process because that's how you learn, and you need to learn to succeed.
Damn, I love that, man. I love that. Like sometimes, yeah, all it takes is one win or one person to tell you can do it, or just like that
Yeah.
idea that you can't get out, you can't sort of keep in your head like that. That's all. That's all it takes. But it's crazy
Hmm.
to me, like because looking back now, so now I've started an agency. I'm looking at back at like my previous. So I'm 23 now. I'm looking back at my previous sort of 23 years. I'm like, what the hell was I doing? Just sitting there and doing nothing every single day. It actually confuses me. It really just confuses me. I'm like, this isn't that hard. It just takes a little bit of work every single day for like a year. Like
Yes.
that's all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that you make a good point. I'm 32 now, so like,
Yeah.
shit, man. You got 10 years more, and you're way ahead than I was at that age, I think. But things take time. That's something else that's more of a recent learning for me. Because why? Because I was launching these companies after natural disasters, and the truth is, like, you can't actually have that amount of success in a short amount of time. The reason why we are able to do it is because it was a special time. It's a natural disaster. The demand is higher than anything. It doesn't matter if we had misspellings on our website. It doesn't matter. You just have to say, I can help you, and you will be booked up. But what happens after that, the natural disaster, is the demand slowly goes down, and then you kind of go back to normal levels, and you're like, oh shit, now I got to compete with the real big boys. Not everybody needs roofing. It's like now it's like the demand is low, and the supply of roofers is now back to meet the natural demand. And so they're not going to come to me. They're going to go to the guys that have a way better, larger presence, the ones that have more referrals, the ones that are actually connected with insurance companies. So, but I think us doing these like hit and quit it, so to speak, and like having so much success quickly and down, I think falsely made me believe that, like, oh, true, like you can do success really fast. Same with the air purifier business. Like, that was an incredible launch, but it became impossible to maintain that growth curve because the demand was so significant, right? So I think that was, and me thinking, oh, I can launch a business every 90 days. Like, yes, you could do it, but it's a lot more difficult than just focusing on one thing and just let that thing compound over time, which is effectively what I'm doing now by just going all in on Twitter, going all in on just my personal brand, systems and operations. I'm not launching any more companies. Just this one, just the one, me helping other people with their systems and operations.
That's really interesting. I mean, the fact that you said that you've launched these businesses and they were successful in the short term, that gives you that conviction and the delusion, to a sense, that you can do it. So in a way, it actually has helped you inadvertently, like to kind of make you feel like you could. Like, it kind of like raises your ego a little bit to be like, okay, cool, I can do this. What else can I do? And so that's really good that you've actually like been able to leverage that like really well. I actually want to flip the script
at the same time, like, it was like a slap in the face, like, oh, like, moving company, like, it's not exactly what I thought. It didn't play out exactly how I wanted. The product e-commerce company, like, well, it didn't play out exactly as I thought. And so it was like a bit of slap in the face, but I think there's pros and cons, but definitely a lot of pros to like give me that experience and confidence that, like, at least to try things, because ultimately it's all we got to do is try things.
That's exactly it, man. And like you iterate as you go, right? It's not just about, oh, like you say, the assumption, it's not about the assumptions, it's about like actually getting like real world data. And that's what's more important. I actually wanted to flip the script and ask you, what's the biggest struggle in the sort of process of building businesses has been in your sort of career?
So historically speaking, with the environmental air testing company, the main source, like Google Ads, is the main way that we get work. More so then than now, but still, obviously now that the brand has a little bit more of a presence and it gets referrals. But I thought, like, oh, and that's what happened with the natural disasters. How do we get the work? Google Ads. We were using keywords. So I started to become very lenient on ads to get work. And what happens with that is that it became difficult to scale, because you can only max out Google Ads as much as, the people are searching it. Then what? Then you got to try other different channels. Then you got to do networking. Like, what we're doing now, like, I never really did before. And so I think I became so lenient on one channel for leads and work that it became difficult to continue to scale the air testing company, because I just didn't know how. Like, I thought Google Ads was just like all I needed, and it's not the case. So I think just like that was a big roadblock, but now I'm in a position where I'm starting to learn about content creation and organic growth, and like, I'm loving that, like, just no ads at all. Now the air testing company is still going on, it still has the same strategy, but like, on my end, I'm learning about content creation in a whole different world. But I think, to answer your question, just the the difficulty of scaling a business via one channel and how limiting it is to just rely on one, especially when it's just like advertising, and how much greater the potential is when you're having organic compounding growth.
That's really, really interesting because yeah, like the personal brand is your business, right? It's like how you generate
Yeah.
your leads, it's how you network, it's how you
Yeah.
pretty much do anything that you want. How have you experienced, or what has your experience been with building your personal brand? Like, what are some of the coolest experiences you've had with it, or the coolest people you've met, or the coolest opportunities you've got, the coolest clients? Like, what's like kind of your experience with building a personal brand?
Yeah, it was very lonely in the beginning, just like with
Ah,
everyone
I
else,
feel
right?
you, man.
Um, so the interesting thing is that, so when I first started, I started on Twitter. And so I was posting on Twitter, not scheduling posts. I was just like, all right, like I gotta post something like every day. And I was like, just trying to think and post, and wasn't even really engaging. I was just creating content under this like new account. And and then over time I started creating threads. And then so I realized, all right, well, if I'm creating threads, then I'm gonna post on LinkedIn too. And so I started putting the thread on LinkedIn. And then when I started doing that, I'm like, well, if I'm creating LinkedIn posts, then I might as well read those and put them on video. And so that led me to start posting YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikToks. Um, so a funny thing is like when I started getting into TikTok initially, I somehow managed to go viral 3 times in like a week.
What?
So that, yeah, and they were actually not related to, at the time I didn't know what my topics were. I was just talking about like productivity and like one video, the first video was about it was actually about CO2 in a car, and how, like, that like recirculation button in the car. With newer cars is less of a problem because they actually have an auto feature where they turn off and on so that you actually get fresh air when you're supposed to. But I brought an air sensor in the car, and I turned that on, and like the parts per million of the carbon dioxide, which is what we breathe out, grew exponentially within like minutes. So I made a TikTok about like, hey, like, I own an air quality testing company. I went on this drive up north, and like the levels just went insane. Imagine how high it gets like in a minivan with like a whole family, and they have this thing turned on all the time. And that could be problematic because like you can get fogginess. It has all kinds of things, but like in terms of like your short term driving experience, it could really alter it. So that ended up getting like 1.8 million views. It's still on my TikTok, although I don't really post TikTok. And so I feel like that was another confidence, was like, oh, sweet, like I got this, like creating content, but I have no means of like monetizing necessarily because my air testing company is local. It's only in Toronto. I mean, it's we can there's we do offer like some nationwide services, but for the most part, it's very local. So these views are like worldwide. So like it doesn't really we don't have like a digital product or physical product to sell them. So and then somehow I managed to go viral 2 other times, like 2 weeks later. One was about the air quality in an airplane. I brought an air sensor in an airplane. Turns out like airplanes actually have like amazing air quality and air filtration. Where they really lack and suffer is in the humidity. So I was like, make sure to stay hydrated. And that was at the time of COVID. So I feel like people were like, that probably triggered some people a little bit. Or people found it really interesting because they weren't sure, like, is it sketchy to be on a plane during COVID or not? It turns out like, no, they have amazing airflow in there. The other viral video was a tip, a Gmail tip hack. But anyway, so I started creating content everywhere. But other than those 3 viral videos out on TikTok, it was basically like nothing. Like people, just no traction anywhere. And so to answer back to your question, over time I started to just double down on a single platform. So my experience has been that it's much easier to grow your personal brand if you double down on a single platform first. Main reason is like, and I'm a systems guy, so I thought like, hey, I can systemize this. Like, it won't take too much time. Like, little things add up, and they actually do take time. So I decided to double down on Twitter, and that has really helped my growth significantly. Also, I like Twitter is like my favorite platform to consume. So I thought to myself, like, if I can consume on the same platform that I'm just like creating. And like, if I don't have to worry about engaging, like on like, cause you know, what I learned over time is like, it's not just about posts, you have to engage with people. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's kind of like an important, you know, aspect of building a personal brand, because it exposes you to other accounts that would never wouldn't otherwise see you. And on top of like additional networking, like you and I have done so. But I'm like, oh, well, now I got to dedicate like 30 minutes of engaging on LinkedIn and 30 minutes engaging on Twitter. And so these things do add up. And I got to, you know, create the video and like, you know, I went deep. I got like the wireless microphone, the LED light. So anyway, my point is like doubling down on a single platform just so you can really dedicate, engage, and create in a single place really has been a key factor to my more recent growth. And I think it's super critical. And then I'll go to other platforms later on.
Interesting. What are your sort of 6-month plans then with your Twitter?
6-month plan?
Yeah.
I don't have a 6-month plan. I'm just consistent. I'm just staying consistent. I mean, yeah, I don't really have a plan. I feel like I'm really enjoying getting lost in the moment at the moment, which is like, hey, like monotonous work, getting clients, that's exciting. Consistent growth on Twitter. So I don't know if I feel like I'll probably just be only on Twitter for the next while. I mean, I post on Instagram sometimes. That's just like personal photos, not really like for my business. I don't have like an expectation of myself that I have to grow this thing or that I have to engage. That's another thing is like I was on a cruise in November and I was still creating content on like multiple platforms and I had to like, okay, I'll film a video and like, it honestly didn't feel natural to me. So I guess it's another key takeaway is like, do what feels natural to you. Like, yeah, I could go on camera, but it was like, Twitter is like, if I just do like written, it's much easier to schedule it and like, just felt more natural and comfortable to me. But I don't really have like a 6-month plan, man. And just keep going. Just appreciate the consistency and the growth that happens from it.
I love that, man, because it's literally like the highest returning asset you can invest in. Just consistently every single day, just putting a little bit into it. That's amazing, man. I just wanted to wrap this off then with just one final question. So my question is, what would you challenge the audience to do?
Clarify what your accountabilities are in your personal and business. What are the things you have to do on a recurring basis? Do a brain dump and list them all out. And that is gonna, first of all, feel amazing to do. The more you can get out of your head, the better. I do like Tiago Forte's concept of like building a second brain. Like, let's use this brain for the present to be productive. And let's build systems for everything else. But you know, again, systems is can be overwhelming of a concept as we've talked about on this podcast episode. So really, it's just like start with your accountabilities and then add them to like a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly checklist, and systemize when you're doing that. And already just by batching that and not thinking about that, like you're already going to be a way more productive person. You're going to be way more, stress-free, relaxed, present. And the cool thing about these like accountabilities is like they can change over time. So it's very easy to just add something to a checklist or remove it. And another beautiful thing is that what I see people experience, including myself, when they start building these like recurring checklists and accountabilities, is that you'll see how quickly you're able to push that. You think things have to get done on a daily, weekly basis. You end up pushing back from a weekly to a monthly or monthly to a quarterly. And just like appreciating how much more time you get back.
That's really awesome, man. I love how passionate you are about systems. Like this whole conversation, you've just been like so into talking about. I love how granular you can get as well. Like one of those
Thanks,
things.
man. Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like everyone should have that thing that they just can't stop talking about all the time and can go like super granular, because that's when you're really leaning into your like strengths and like your like natural inclinations. But yeah, man, this has been awesome.
I want to touch on one thing you just said, because you just said like, you know, that's the thing that like for me I can just talk about forever.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I can talk about it forever is because like I've consumed a lot of content on it. Like, you know, we're not born being able to talk about. I wasn't born being able to talk about systems like naturally, right? But my interest in you know, an inclination led me to learn more about the system. So I think it's like really just follow your curiosity and like double down on things that interest you, and then you will be able to talk about it a lot more than maybe, you know, you'll go from consuming to really talking and sharing and teaching. So it all starts with learning and trying for sure.
100%. It's like thinking about the few things that you might like and then just trying it, just keep on implementing it, and
Yeah.
then being like self-aware enough to know if it's something that you're doing because you like to, or
Mhm.
it's because society is telling you to, or because it earns a lot of money. So there's a lot of different factors there, and it's about cutting out the noise and finding what remains, which is the signal, which is how you guide yourself to what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that that's easier said than done. I feel.
Mhm. Totally, man. Yeah, man. Like, thanks for inviting me on. This has been a lot of fun. And happy to, you know, we get to connect and be able to chat in this format.
Awesome, man. No worries. Where can people find you?
ThomasMorales.com. Everything is there. And yeah, my Twitter's on there. The letters I am Thomas Morales, super active on there. And yeah.
Awesome, ladies and gentlemen. Morales. I can't even say her name. Thomas Morales. Cool. Let's get it. Let's get it. All right. Let me just stop this recording.